I'm Margaret. I'm 86 years old. And exactly 1 week ago, I did something I never thought I would do. I made a choice that at this point in my life, many would call unnecessary, even reckless. But it wasn't. It was the most important decision I've ever made. I need you to hear this story because it's not about wealth or scandal. It's not about dramatic life events. It's about ordinary people, ordinary choices, and the quiet courage it sometimes takes to finally put yourself first. I've lived a long life. I was married once, raised 2 children, worked jobs that paid the bills, and kept promises that weren't always mine to keep. On paper, I had a respectable life. People would have looked at me and said I'd done everything right, and maybe I had, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what really mattered. I lost a lot along the way, though I didn't notice it first. I lost nights of sleep worrying about what other people might think. I lost years saying yes when I wanted to say no. I lost small pieces of myself in the daily routines of keeping my family happy, keeping my home running, keeping my reputation intact. And by the time I reached 80, I realized something terrifying. I had spent almost my entire life trying not to disappoint anyone, and in the process, I disappointed myself. It started slowly with my health. Nothing catastrophic, just the little reminders that I wasn't invincible. A doctor's note here, a routine test there. My body wasn't moving like it used to. I had aches that weren't there before. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I didn't recognize, and for the first time I admitted it aloud. I didn't like what I saw. I didn't like who I had become. I felt the weight of regret pressing in, not for the big decisions I'd made, because I did my best, but for the small compromises, the endless putting of everyone else's happiness before my own that had added up, and I knew I couldn't go on like this. My decision wasn't about leaving anyone or anything. I wasn't abandoning family or friends. I wasn't fleeing responsibility. It was about saying yes to myself for the first time in a very long time. For years I had postponed joy. I told myself, I'll do that when the children are grown, or I'll try that when my health is better, or I'll think about that when the bills are paid. And then decades passed, and I realized the moment I'd been waiting for would never arrive unless I created it. So I made the decision. I joined a small group in my town, not a club, not a volunteer program, just people meeting once a week to talk about books, share stories, laugh, and sometimes cry. I hesitated. What could I offer at 86? Would I feel out of place? At first I did, but only for a moment. Then something remarkable happened. I started to feel alive again. Conversations that had faded decades ago, laughter that had been dormant, curiosity I'd abandoned, all came rushing back. I remembered how to want, how to anticipate joy, how to feel connection without obligation. It wasn't dramatic, no fireworks, no revelation from the sky, just ordinary moments, a cup of coffee with someone who truly listened, a walk without agenda, a conversation about a book I didn't have to analyze. And yet in those simple moments I felt freedom, freedom to laugh, to cry, to exist for myself. And then I did something that felt almost impossible. I reconnected with someone from my past. Not a romantic rekindling, at least not in the way people assume, but a connection that had ended abruptly decades ago, one that had left me wondering and aching quietly for years. Life circumstances had separated us. Time had passed, but I reached out anyway, and he answered. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't like a movie, but it was honest. It was real. It reminded me that even at 86, the world still has space for connection, for joy, for the unexpected. What I learned through all of this is simple, but it's something most people don't allow themselves to truly feel until much later in life. Happiness is a choice, not the kind of happiness that comes from achieving or acquiring, not the fleeting kind that comes from approval or recognition, the kind that comes from deciding fully to honor yourself, to care for yourself, to live for yourself, even when it feels selfish. And the older you get, the more urgent it becomes, because the time you've left isn't infinite. And the truth is, the years you spend small, quiet, careful, and compliant are years that can never be recovered. I often think back to my younger self, the one who worked tirelessly to meet expectations, who said yes when she wanted to say no, who stayed in situations out of obligation or fear. I wish I could have whispered this to her. It's okay to want more. It's okay to want joy. It's okay to take a leap, even if it seems unnecessary or late. You don't need anyone's permission. At 86, I finally understand that fully. I finally allowed myself the permission I had withheld for decades. Some people might think, why wait so long? And I think, why not? Every stage of life has its challenges. Youth has its inexperience. Middle age has responsibilities. Old age has limitations. But happiness doesn't obey age. It only obeys willingness. You are never too old to change your life. You are never too old to be brave. You are never too old to say yes to yourself. I won't lie. There are still fears. There are moments when I feel fragile, when I question whether I'm being reckless. I live alone now, with only the routines I choose, and that can feel isolating at times. But isolation is nothing compared to the life I had spent living small, quiet, and disconnected from myself. The risks I take now, reaching out, speaking honestly, following my desires, are minor compared to the risk of not taking them at all. I want to make one thing clear. This decision wasn't about abandoning responsibilities or relationships. I'm still connected to my children. I'm still part of a community. I still contribute. I just realized that contribution isn't the same as sacrifice. Giving to others doesn't have to come at the expense of giving to yourself. That was a lesson decades in the making, and I finally learned it. Since making this choice, the change has been subtle but profound. I wake up earlier, not because I have to, but because I want to. I fill my days with things that make me feel alive, not just busy. I have conversations that matter. I laugh louder than I have in years. I cry when I need to, without shame, and the world feels brighter, not because it has changed, but because I have. I want you to hear me clearly. You don't need to wait until you're 86 to do this. You don't need to wait until your health starts reminding you of mortality. You don't need to wait for a dramatic event to justify the pursuit of joy. Your happiness is valid now. Your choices are valid now. You don't need anyone else's approval to start living for yourself. You just need courage. A little courage, repeated consistently, can transform your life at any age. I tell my story not because I'm special or wise or heroic. I tell it because it is ordinary, because it reflects what happens when someone finally decides to care for themselves in a world that always expects more, demands more, and never stops reminding you of your responsibilities. I'm Margaret, and I have finally decided that my happiness matters, that my life matters, that the years I have left are mine to live fully, honestly, and joyfully, and I feel free. So if you're watching this, if you've ever felt small, quiet, careful, or compliant, listen, it's never too late. It's never too late to make the decision that finally makes you happy. It might not be dramatic. It might not make sense to anyone else, but it will make sense to you, and that is enough. Because life is too short to be spent shrinking. Life is too precious to be spent denying yourself joy. Life is meant to be lived. If this story resonated with you, subscribe, turn on notifications. There are more stories coming, stories about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage. And if you've ever made a decision that changed your life, or if you're in the middle of that choice right now, leave a comment, share your experience, talk about your courage, talk about your fears. Your story matters. Your choices matter, and it's never too late to take that leap.